Welcome to the Brave Journey Within with Jim and Jenn. This show is about the spiritual journey and all of the challenges, healing, wisdom, and consciousness expansion experienced along the way.
Welcome to our first episode of Brave Journey Within. I'm your co host, Jim O'Neill, and I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor. And here with me, my co host is Jen Palmer. Hello, Jen.
Hey there, how you doing?
Doing all right. A little bit nervous, but I'm good.
Yeah, so my name is Jen Palmer, and I am an intuitive and energy healer and a spiritual coach. And Jim and I have known each other for a pretty long time now, and we have had some pretty amazing experiences, and we'd love to share with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and being healers or in that journey, working on ourselves along the way and figuring out what works best and really kind of wanting to share those with other people to help them in their own space and in their own path. So, I'm really excited to have you and really looking forward to the things that we come up with. And so, I guess I'll introduce today's topic. So today's topic is facing fear and love. So, two themes that really have come up not only in my own life, but just in the last few years with sort of like this COVID stuff, right? Like, and name all these other things. But learning how to identify fear and what our own edge is with that, and then meeting that with love, which ultimately really means like facing fear with courage.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
really cultivating courage is sort of another thing that sort of, as we talk about certain things, like other elements will pop up as in like, oh, that's really something that you can embody. And from a mindfulness perspective, courage is a big deal, right? Like, how can I grow and develop myself in the way that I want? And typically that means learning to face fear, face doubt, challenges, um, that we oftentimes don't want to do, which only hinders our growth.
Yeah, I think probably a good place to start this would just to even be talking about what is fear and love, because I think for some people that might even be a new concept. When we think of love, we think of human love. We think of, oh, okay, I have feelings for this person. But what we're talking about is a much deeper experience of the idea of love, and that every single thing, every single point of view, every single judgment, every single awareness comes down to either one of those, right? And so the idea that love is only a human experience is it's very superficial in terms of what we're trying to experience and talk about in our spiritual journey. And when you think of the idea of courage and having to face your fear through courage and come into a loving space, there's a lot of trauma to deal with all of that. We've it's been such a traumatizing experience for all of us here on this planet, and there's so much that we go through, and we end up learning through these experiences a lot of times that we need to make decisions or approach relationships or approach our lives through fear because we could get hurt. And the journey of the spiritual seeker is to overcome that fear through courage and step into love and really embrace seeing everything through the eyes of love. But that's that's a
Well,
very
no,
simplistic way to put it, because it's
yeah,
not an
when you
easy journey.
distill it down to its essence, right? It's very profound. Are you? And I'll say this to my clients, like, are you leading with love or fear? And it's not always obvious because we can be so reactionary to things or so defensive with ourselves or wanting to avoid it. I guess you brought up defining fear. I feel like fear is this, lizard brain, right? Like instinct survival.
Yes.
How can it keep us safe? That anxiety, right? Like, don't do this. It's risky. It's scary. And when it's used properly, it'll keep you alive. Your body's designed to identify those types of threats and things like that. But I think where it in today's modern world, we're fire hosed with a lot of fear and propaganda. Just like turn on the news and watch the news and just notice what happens to your body and your stress reaction to that.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
cannot help but notice, I'll notice tension or my heart racing or feeling emotions. It hijacks your that part of your brain, right? Your amygdala, where you're immediately in fight or flight a lot. And it's really hard to, I don't say avoid it, but there is truth in that, right? Like being aware of where your attention is, so being mindful of that, because a lot of times I think you'll notice that you are caught up, or we are caught up in that fight or flight state of mind. And, we tend to worry about things, especially if you're not careful, where you get in that default mode of constant worry, or catastrophic thinking. And you come by it honestly, right? Like it's just all around you, social media, the news, things like that. It's hard to pay attention to things that you want to pay attention to, really.
And it's addictive. So, one of the things I've noticed in my own journey and working with a lot of clients is that fear is mostly associated with your egoic consciousness. That part of you that identifies as Jim or Jen or whatever your name is, right? And the fear is associated with this experience in this space that we call Earth, right? Whatever this is, right? And that fear doesn't really come from that soul space as much as it comes from the egoic version of us, or this physical experience. And the same thing with human love, that comes from a more egoic nature as well. But when you're talking about the more spiritual aspect of love, or seeing the world through the eyes of love, or that Christ consciousness, unconditional loving energy, that's really coming from like the observer space or the soul space. And when you start approaching looking at the world and what's happening in your experience through those eyes, like that's really the journey, is learning to see it through that versus the ego. And so I tend to associate the ego with fear and the soul with true deep unconditional love, because human love is always conditional. It just always is. We always find, these reasons to judge and be upset or be angry or be triggered by something. Um, that really is that ego. That's that aspect of us. And so when I think a lot of times when people start down their spiritual journey, I don't think they look at it through the eyes of what is real, deep, unconditional spiritual love. Like, what is that? Because we aren't used to experiencing it. And we need to find it, right? I think that's why they call it, we're a seeker. We're looking for truth and we're looking for love. We're trying to figure it out. And we're doing it from a foundation of fear. And so, one of the first steps, I think, in my experience, is to figure out that you're on that foundation of fear, even if you think you're coming from love. Because if you haven't really truly identified what that unconditional love feels like, you're not going to notice it. And, you're going to get triggered and you're
Sure.
going to get upset. And it's all going to be fear. It's going to be very fear based. So I think that there's steps and there's like a range of how you get there. And I think a lot of people, I've noticed in the spiritual community, it's almost, I don't want to say it's a trap, but it's maybe part of the process where we're going down this road and we're trying to find what unconditional love is. And we think it's human based. So we get caught up in the human experience. But then we also get triggered pretty easily too. If someone says something, you see it in all the different spiritual communities, whether it's a religion or non-religious, whatever. We're in search of truth, but then we get triggered when someone else doesn't understand our truth or what we think is a truth, right? Which really is just a point of view. But but
Yes.
right? I mean, even in the spiritual community with all these loving people, you still have people who are like judging each other and angry at each other and like saying bad things about each other. And it's like, okay, well that's not deep unconditional love right there. That's judgment. That's still fear.
Yes. It, but that's you mentioned like the process. It's becoming aware of that you we have a tendency to be in that state of mind and then to detach from it in some way or disconnect, um, or just be a neutral observer, of our human condition, becoming aware of our thoughts and emotions. Specific to fear, you have, there's so many good quotes, but just most of your thoughts or that are anxiety provoking aren't, they never happen. So you
That's so
have this
true.
perpetual thing where it's like, oh, but what if, no one likes me, or they think I'm this or that, these inner critical type things. It's like, what if no one really cares? What?
Or even if they do, so what? You know what I mean? Because they've
Yeah.
got their own judgments and points of view, and it really it doesn't matter in the big picture of things.
So you mentioned defining fear. The whole false evidence appearing real is one that's kind of good. Uh, which I think if you really take a dive into it, and all of this, by the way, are things that you can do. Like, so like through a mindfulness lens, it's like, okay, discover where your own edge with fear is, and then just notice it. How does that impact your life? Where is your personal edge with it? Does it keep you from, I don't know, someone just told me, like, during COVID they didn't leave their house. Okay, well, that's a very clearly defined edge of fear. If I
Yeah.
leave my house, I will, die or something. But take it, you can expand that out to all these different things. And everyone's edge with it is different, but just becoming aware of it is like a first step. And if you meet anyone that says, well, I don't have any fear, then like, whatever, yeah, they're lying. we all
Yeah, no, I
we
agree.
all have it. It's just different with different people. And then
Yeah.
courage, right, is taking action in spite of fear. So
Yep.
when you see someone doing things, it doesn't mean they don't have fear of it, right? That you have to have some sense of fear, right? Or risk of losing or failing or something, but knowing that and doing it anyway,
Yeah,
that's
because I think that's
courage.
how we grow, right? But I think, when you boil it down to love versus fear, there's this idea that it's really not about, well, I guess it could be about so many different things, but when you're really looking at it from a spiritual point of view, you're diving into this mindset. It's like these glasses that we wear and how we see the world, right? So if you're looking at a big picture, every single thing in your life can be looked at through either lens. And I remember when, gosh, I was early on in my awakening and spiritual seeking path. And most of my decisions and most of my viewpoints were made in fear. Even after diving in and becoming, an energy healer and things like that, you still have a lot of work to do. And new awakenings happen every day. Even now, new awakenings happen every day for me. And new ways in which I'm finding my fear and how to step more into love through that fear and how to master that fear through love and choosing love even when it's difficult, right? So that's still just when I think I have it, mastered, the universe throws me something new. But when I first started realizing this about myself and realizing that there was another way to see the world, um, I remember talking to God. I use the term God, God, universe, and just saying, all right, you know what? I'm committing to the path of love. I'm committing to that path. And I really want to see that more in myself. And I've been thrown lots of tests and challenges, and I don't always pass it. But I'm reminded to come back to it. And that's the journey. But I remember to physicalize it, to make it real for me, that decision. I went with my family and a friend to, um, we did like an experiment with heights. I'm scared to death of heights, and we decided to go zip lining. So I was going to conquer my fear of heights through zip lining. So that was perfect for me. So even climbing up the ladder to the first platform, I was just shaking, knowing, oh my God, I'm going to be jumping off this platform. And every time I jumped, I can't remember how many platforms there were. I think there were like 10 or 12 platforms. And every time I would jump off of a platform, I was like recommitting. I am jumping off of the platform of fear and onto the platform of love. And that was my commitment to the universe, that I am going to switch my point of view. And
I
I
love
try
that.
to hold to it. I know, right? I try to hold to it. I really do. None of us are perfect at it, but that is the journey. And I think if you start feeling like you're always seeing it from love, I know very few people that I think would actually match that, and for real, be coming from that space all the time.
Yeah.
And, I think it's human nature to get triggered. I think it's human nature to fear something and pull away, or even put up boundaries. So I've been learning some interesting lessons over the last couple years around the idea of boundaries and what does that really mean? Because if you're putting up a boundary, and I'm not talking about healthy boundaries, like truly healthy boundaries. I'm talking about those boundaries that people up and often will call healthy boundaries, but it's like, I don't like them, or there's a judgment, or maybe they did something wrong and I'm just going to block them. And but you're drawing
Like
these.
write someone off.
Yes, and you're like blocking people. That's blocking and resisting energy. And that is also creating a separation. And that's usually done out of fear, not out of love.
That's a good one.
Right? I know I've been really processing this over the last couple years, especially the last year. It's been very interesting, my conversations with my guides and trying to really come to terms with what is this thing with boundaries. And it's not to say that we don't need boundaries sometimes, or we need to define what it is we want in a situation. So what I've been trying to learn how to do is, how do I stay or get sometimes I'm out of a loving space. How do I get back into a loving space and do it in a way where I can navigate this, whatever the situation is, into a space of a healthy relationship or a healthy communication or just a healthy experience where I don't have to put up resistance to something. So it's trying to put through the eyes of love the correct forward motion, as opposed to blocking or focusing on the negative or fear aspects of whatever's going on. And that's currently where I'm discovering myself in that process.
Well, I guess it would be helpful to point it out. So you have to have awareness of that first. The the resistance part, or in mindfulness we would say like non-resistance, allowing it to happen or to fully experience it, not fighting it, right? So like the whole what the cliche is, like what you resist persists. So if you keep doing it, right, like if you keep writing people off, like it's going to be a lonely world. But but getting the awareness of that, being non-judgmental with it, not resisting it, and then maybe the term is transmuting it, but just, okay, I love and accept the part of me that messed up or didn't do the loving thing or lost my cool and behaved in a way that I don't like. um, Now again, you got to be tricky with all that, right? Like, So I love and accept the part of me that missed the mark. You can say that in a way that's helpful as part of that process, or one that really takes you down a notch. And so from a loving perspective, it's like, okay, if you love, you shift into your heart. Like, I love and accept the part of me that failed or messed up. Now you're coming at it, you're approaching it from a heart centered place where you can regroup, right? Like, what is the loving thing to do in this situation? Because maybe it's clear, but maybe it's not,
Hmm.
and that's sort of getting back into your own trusting yourself, right? Your own intuition. Like, what is what's the next best thing to do, or the next wisest thing to do, or it's the next logical step or heart centered step in this that I can then kind of regroup and get to.
Yeah, it's interesting too because I've noticed that, the people who are on this journey, this positive spiritual journey where they're trying to be of service to others and they're really trying to come from love and not separation or fear. One of the things that we often have to navigate is the idea that, people abuse us or take advantage of us or step all over us in some way or, cross our boundaries or something like that. And we end up getting mistreated. Um, and, you know, that's the opposite end of that pendulum. Like you get mistreated or you put up hard boundaries. And those hard boundaries, though, it's the opposite side of that pendulum. And I think the idea is to rise beyond the pendulum, to not have to put up hard boundaries and to also not have to be a doormat and have people step all over you. So the idea is coming into a space of non-resistance, but also coming into your power with something. Maybe it's a relationship, right?
You bring up a really good point, and I think people do get confused about this.
Hmm.
I view love, and we talk about leading with love, as empowering yourself and not being a doormat. So not being nice and letting people walk over you. It's having the courage to like stand up for yourself and create healthy boundaries and do hard things in a loving way.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think when, if you're coming from love, it also means self-love, you know, respecting and honoring yourself. But when you're deciding what you want, if you're putting up those hard boundaries, that's usually out of fear, fear that it's going to happen again, or fear that you can't be in your power enough to really deal with the situation. But that's usually a fear-based or resistance-based response to an issue that's happening, right? And so what a lot of people do is that they either get passive aggressive and they don't face things directly, or they get mean or they get nasty in some way, and they end up just as bad as the person who's walking all over them, right? As far as that goes, the behavior and the response. Um,
Well,
but
yeah, because you get into going back to one of the five hindrances, like holding resentment or bitterness towards somebody, right? So you're out of love.
yeah, and who doesn't go through that, right?
Oh, right. Like, oh, it's a
Yeah.
no judgment. Like,
Yes.
raise your hand if you've never had any of these issues. It's like,
Right. I know, seriously, we're all human here. But I think the goal is to figure out and to see it. That's that brave journey, right? The brave journey within is seeing where you're doing it, where are you separating, where are you not in love? Because ideally, I mean, really on a big picture scale of things, we are here to learn about that love, that true, deep, unconditional love, that Christ consciousness experience of love. We're here to learn how to do that. And it's like going to the gym. If you're not being tested or you're not lifting weights or you're not, trying to challenge yourself, you're not going to really know what it feels like. You're not going to know what it means to push it to the limit or to grow your muscles because you've done all that work, and you're not going to get big, strong, and buff, or you're not going to get that endurance without the challenge. But that's part of the reason of being here, is because we're meant to stress that. We're meant to get stressed around it. We're meant to figure it out and to try to find more love within us when it's really hard. And the people who
Yeah.
are testing us the most are probably the ones that we're closest to in spirit.
Yes. Usually how it works. But yeah, right, like God is light, or if you can wrap your head around that, but you can't have light without darkness too, right? Like, how would you know?
Yeah, exactly.
You have to experience that contrast with things.
It's funny. There's a, and I think this is still something I'm trying to work through myself, the idea of duality but at the same time the law of one. Like they're they're seemingly two different teachings. You have duality, there's light and dark, there's positive, negative, and there's separation and there's, in some ways of looking at it, it's judgment, it's, you're you and I'm me. So it's very separate. And duality is like that. And this experience here in 3D Earth is meant to be like that. But just like I was saying, there's the pendulum of going back and forth, and we're meant to get off of the pendulum. We're meant to ascend the pendulum, not find our balance in the pendulum. We're meant to get off of it. It's the same thing. So we have this idea of duality, but coming into the law of one, which I know we're probably going to do another conversation around law of one, but
Sure.
coming into the idea of law of one, it's transcending duality and not operating from that space, knowing that that space does exist. But the higher version of that, the ascended version of that, is we are one and we are all very much connected. You're me and I'm you in a much higher way of looking at things. And which is a lot harder to say when someone's really triggering you in the moment and you're meant to come into love.
Do you when I the way that I first interpreted that was sort of the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Um, but they do, I mean, they offer that as a teaching, right? Like if you want to kind of shed karma, it's seeing yourself as the other, looking into the other's eyes and seeing you and approaching it from a loving perspective that way, which is super high level. It's not easy to do, right?
It's
Especially if
fun.
someone's treating you poorly.
Yeah, yeah. It's in the energetic realm of things and doing energy healing. What I've noticed is when you have no push or pull with an energy or an idea or a trauma or something that you've done, a karma or something, when there's no push or pull with it. In other words, like, I don't know, say someone just robbed you, right? And you were very upset. But when you get to the point where you're not triggered by the fact that someone broke into your home and robbed you, um, in order to get to that point, a lot of times you have to clear karma around the idea that maybe you robbed somebody in the past. And then so you ask for forgiveness for what you've done, but you also forgive those who've done it to you. And it becomes neutralized. The energy is just neutral. And then you won't have those experiences anymore. So I think a lot of times in coming into love, it's about neutralizing that push pull energy that keeps you from love. Which, if you're upset that someone just robbed you, you're not in love. You're not in a loving space. You're in a fear space because someone just robbed you, and now you suddenly don't feel safe. So a lot of that's where healing comes in because you need to really work through and heal the traumas you've had as a soul in this lifetime or past lifetimes, so that you can come into a more neutral space. And it's easier to find your way into love when you're in that neutral space.
I would agree. It's hard to get. Part of mindfulness is shifting into that, and shifting is probably like this great word. Like, yes, okay, this happened, but shift and see if you can see it from another perspective or a higher perspective, and start to examine it from that lens, a more neutral lens, and then I think you can get greater insights, if you will, from that.
Yeah, yeah, very much. But it's such a journey, we're not meant to be perfect at it. No one is perfect. And, and some of us are meant to help others see it and to help find it within themselves. And that's why you got into the work that you got into, right? Because you're
Yeah.
meant to help people see that as a possibility.
Well, so love ultimately, and what I tell people is this healing frequency, and the more that you tap into it, it's a brave journey within. when you look inside yourself and start to relate to yourself and your past, whatever trauma and anything else that's ever happened, when you're able to do that with love, you will start to release those things that are holding you back. It's just very empowering. It allows you to develop, I think, better relationships with yourself, but then by consequence, other people.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Well, I think what I would like to say, because it's, I think our conversation is wrapping up, but what I would like to say is for those of us on this journey of really going within and trying to find more love in our experience, to be patient with yourself and understand that it is the journey. You're going to be doing it the rest of your life here and probably way on into the future of your soul's existence. You're learning about love. So try to get out of the shame and the judgment of yourself and just really be present with the journey of it, because it's so important. Because when we get upset and we get in shame of our screw ups and when we've messed up with something or we're not living up to our idea of what we could be or should be, we end up, just holding back, and we don't launch forward like we could. So I just say, just be patient and just keep loving yourself through that process.
and I'll end by defining patience, but it's
Yeah.
the wisdom to allow things to unfold in their own time. And I think no remembering that you are where you are for a reason right now, and you can shift it, you can change it and make it better, but being okay with that.
I love it. Thank you, Jim.
All right, Jennifer, you be well. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Yeah, you too.
All right, bye.
We are so grateful that you joined us. Check out the description to learn more about us and also for additional resources to help you on your journey.